Bible prophecy is active and unfolding daily. Zechariah 12, Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Here is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's newscast. Secretary of State John Kerry is displaying an advanced case of foot and mouth disease. He made an unhelpful, mistaken, and ill-informed comment about the current wave of Palestinian violence when he linked it to a massive increase in settlements over the course of the last years, quote unquote. There has simply not been a massive increase. Further, State Department spokesperson John Kirby said that Israel possibly used excessive force in subduing Palestinian assailants. Really? Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon responded, saying, quote, "We are using excessive force? If someone is wielding a knife and killing people, then our response is considered excessive force? What are we talking about here? This is nonsense," close quote. Rather than condemn Palestinian Arab terrorist tactics, the United States State Department condemns Israel's excessive use of force when it retaliates against terror attacks. And CNN began a lengthy article last Tuesday titled, "When and How Will the Violence Stop?" An article which fails to identify the Palestinian perpetrators of the violence. CNN doesn't mention or even hint at the fact that Palestinians have been attempting to murder Israelis. What's up with that? I'm telling you, my friends, it's no joke that the Word says that Satan is the prince of this world. Everyone who loves the world hates Israel, and by the way, is an enemy of Elohim. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 tells us that if anyone loves the things of this world, love for the Father is not in them. And one of my favorites, James, that's Yaakov, chapter 4, verse 4, tells us that friendship with the world means enmity against Elohim, and anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of Elohim. Turning to wars and rumors of wars, on Tuesday, October 13th, from the Washington Post, insurgents fired 2 shells at the Russian embassy in the Syrian capital of Damascus, as hundreds of pro-government supporters gathered outside the compound to thank Moscow for its intervention in Syria. No casualties were reported. 2 Hezbollah commanders were killed, fighting alongside government forces against rebels in Syria's Idlib province. Then on Wednesday, October 14th, Iraqi forces have made significant advances around Ramadi, and an operation to retake the city captured by the Daesh, that is ISIS, is being planned. The Iraqi army and volunteer militia fighters, who are mostly Shiite, launched an assault to retake the city of Baiji in northern Iraq from ISIS. Baiji is near the country's largest oil refinery and is only 150 kilometers away from Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, which fell to the hardline Sunni militants of ISIS in June last year. On Saturday, October 17th, the military operation has started in rural southern Aleppo. There were heavy clashes near the Jebel Azan region, about 12 kilometers, that's like 8 miles, south of Aleppo city, control of which is divided between government forces and rebels. The area the army and Russian jets were targeting was close to a main road heading south towards Damascus, the capital. Now, in last week's newscast, as well as the week before, there's this whole new activity, emerging with, the knives and the rocks, and it's really the Intifada. So I'm incorporating a new segment to the newscast, and that is the Intifada update. Intifada is an Arabic word meaning tremor, shivering, shuddering. It's a contemporary Arabic term referring to an uprising against oppression. And this is what we're seeing growing here, my friends. Social media users advised potential stabbers how to make their attacks as deadly as possible. Among many other postings, a user from Gaza named Zahran Barba posted the following anatomical chart showing which parts of the body to aim for. And while the Palestinian Authority, the PA, is trying to direct this wave of violence into a popular resistance resembling the first Intifada, with demonstrations, throwing stones, fire bombs, and the use of cold weapons, such as knives, and not firearms, Hamas is attempting to incite all the territories, including the Arab communities inside Israel, to use firearms in the fight against Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking on Tuesday at a special Knesset session to mark 14 years since the assassination of Minister Rehavam Ze'evi, said, and I quote, "Israel will settle accounts with the murderers, those who attempt murder, and all those who assist them. Not only will they not enjoy their privileges, but we will exact from them the full cost. Anyone who raises his hand to harm us will pay dearly. And we will not hesitate to use all means at our disposal to restore peace to the cities of Israel." Close quote. Police began setting up checkpoints at all the exits of Palestinian villages and neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. And IDF units are reinforcing the Israel police in cities along roads and along the security fence. On Tuesday, October 13th, from the Times of Israel, Gabay, who arrived at the scene of Tuesday morning's deadly attack in the Jerusalem neighborhood of Armon Hanatziv, where two terrorists boarded a bus and proceeded to shoot and stab passengers, said he saw one of the terrorists sitting in the driver's seat, and that the only thing that stopped the terrorists from hijacking the bus was their inability to figure out how to disable the handbrake. They kept the doors closed, figured that one out, and prevented passengers from leaving while one of them continued his stabbing spree. 78-year-old Haviv Haim died at the scene, and a 45-year-old man died in the hospital. From the Jerusalem Post, once again, Some 30 Gazans breached the border fence on Tuesday afternoon and crossed into Israel before they were surrounded and contained by IDF units that used crowd dispersal means to push them back into Gaza. 60-year-old Rabbi Yeshayahu Krishevsky was killed, and 2 other Israelis were wounded after a Palestinian driver rammed into a crowd in Jerusalem on Tuesday morning. The terrorist then exited his car with a meat cleaver and began attacking the wounded until he was subdued by police. Demonic possession. This is Satan's army, my friends. And these people are possessed by demons, controlling them and urging them to do these murderous, unbelievable acts. In a separate incident, 2 Israelis were killed and 3 others suffered gunshot wounds in a combined shooting and stabbing attack by 2 Arab assailants on a bus in the Armon Hanatziv neighborhood of Jerusalem. Some 15 people were wounded in the attack. 1 Palestinian attacker was killed and the other was captured. And an Arab woman stabbed a border police officer near the National Police headquarters in Jerusalem before being shot by police. Further, an Israeli waiting for a bus near the Ra'anana City Hall was stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist from East Jerusalem. The attacker was subdued by passers-by. Then, an hour later, another terrorist from East Jerusalem stabbed 3 civilians in front of a cafe. A passing driver rammed his car into the terrorist. Also, a 13-year-old Israeli boy was stabbed nearly a dozen times by 2 Palestinian teenagers while riding his bicycle in a Jerusalem neighborhood. 1 Palestinian was neutralized after being hit by a car, while the second stabbed another Israeli before being shot and killed by police. A Palestinian rioter accidentally set himself on fire after attempting to throw a firebomb at IDF soldiers in Hebron. Must be friends with those guys who couldn't figure out how to do the handbrake on the bus. From Ynet News, 22-year-old Mohammed Shmasana from the West Bank stabbed an Israeli soldier on a bus in Jerusalem and tried to snatch the soldier's gun. The terrorist was killed by police. Then on Wednesday, October 14th, from Haaretz, a 70-year-old Israeli woman was stabbed by a Palestinian, Ahmed Sa'aban, 23 years old, of East Jerusalem, as she boarded a bus at the Jerusalem Central bus station on Wednesday. She managed to enter the bus before the driver shut the door on the attacker, causing him to attempt to board another bus. He was shot and killed by a police officer before he could do so. In an earlier attack on Wednesday, 19-year-old Basel Sader, a resident of Hebron in the West Bank, attempted to stab border policemen near Damascus Gate in Jerusalem's Old City before he was killed. And from the Jerusalem Post, Israel police released video footage on Wednesday of the terrorist attack by 2 Arab teens who stabbed 2 Jews in Jerusalem's Piskat Ze'ev neighborhood. The Palestinians claimed that the attackers were completely innocent and had no knives at all. But the terrorists are shown with knives in their hands, chasing after a Jew whom they had stabbed moments before. Then they stabbed a 13-year-old boy who was leaving a convenience store on his bike. The parents of a 15-year-old Palestinian girl reported that she had gone missing after she had sent them a text message saying they would soon hear about her on the news. Police found the girl at the North Beersheba train station on Wednesday. And under questioning, the girl confessed that she was on her way to Jerusalem, where she said she planned on stabbing Jews, soldiers, and the police. Then on Friday, October 16th, from Haaretz, hundreds of Palestinians threw firebombs at the Joseph's Tomb compound in Nablus in the West Bank Friday morning. After some broke in and threw flammables inside the compound, Palestinian security forces took control of the situation. Then, an Israeli soldier was stabbed and wounded at Zayit Junction in the southern West Bank. The attacker was dressed as a photographer with a press camera and was wearing a clearly marked yellow press vest. The terrorist was shot and killed at the scene by other IDF soldiers. On Saturday, October 17th, from Ynet News, an IDF soldier was wounded in a stabbing attack in Hebron Saturday evening. The Palestinian attacker was shot and wounded by 2 other soldiers. Then, a border policeman was nearly stabbed at a checkpoint in the West Bank. The attacker was killed. And further, 2 more stabbing attacks were foiled in Hebron, and yet another in Jerusalem. 2 of them against border police forces and 1 against an Israeli civilian. The attackers were killed in all 3 incidents. On Sunday, October 18th, 19-year-old Israeli soldier Sergeant Omri Levi was killed and 11 others were wounded at the central bus station in Beersheba on Sunday night. 1 armed terrorist entered the central bus station and shot at a soldier and killed him. He continued his shooting spree, took the soldier's gun, and continued shooting until the terrorist was shot and killed. Also, an Eritrean asylum seeker was shot and killed during the incident after a security guard misidentified him as a terrorist. The Palestinian Authority is portraying every terrorist as an innocent victim of Israel. PA Chairman Abbas's spokesman, Nabil Abu Rudaina, stated that Israel had executed Hassan Manasrah, who repeatedly stabbed and critically wounded a 13-year-old boy who was riding his bike in Pisgat Ze'ev. PA Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah told visiting Indian president that Israeli occupation forces assassinated in cold blood the child Hassan Manasrah, while in fact Manasrah is alive and in an Israeli hospital. And the PA news agency stated that Israel attacked and executed in cold blood Muhammad Nazmi, who stabbed an Israeli soldier and 2 others on a bus in Jerusalem. Liars, which makes them nothing less than children of Satan, the father of lies. Ahmed Manasrah, the 13-year-old Palestinian who took part in the stabbing spree, and who PA President Mahmoud Abbas claimed was killed in cold blood by Israeli police, told investigators on Thursday at the Hadassah hospital that he went to the Jerusalem neighborhood of Pisgat Ze'ev to stab Jews. I came with my cousin Hassan, he said. Hassan brought the knives, and I agreed to join him. On Tuesday, Manasrah's father said, quote, "My son cannot stab. He doesn't know how to hold a knife." Doesn't know how to hold a knife? But on Wednesday, police released footage showing the 2 Manasrah boys brandishing knives and chasing a man down the street. To recap this week's newscast, the U.S. State Department, Secretary of State John Kerry, and State Department spokesperson John Kirby all made false accusations condemning Israel for defending itself, and CNN published a lengthy article which fails to identify Palestinians as perpetrators of violence. Insurgents fired 2 shells at the Russian embassy in the Syrian capital of Damascus as hundreds of pro-government supporters gathered outside the compound. 2 Hezbollah commanders were killed fighting alongside government forces against rebels in Syria's Idlib province. Iraqi forces made significant advances around Ramadi, including an operation to retake the city. The Iraqi army and volunteer militia fighters launched an assault to retake the city of Baiji in northern Iraq. And a military operation has started in rural southern Aleppo, where the army and Russian jets were targeting close to a main road heading south towards Damascus. You know, Damascus has not been this active, I don't think, ever. Then, in our Intifada update, social media users are advising potential stabbers on how to make their attacks as deadly as possible. The Palestinian Authority is trying to direct this wave of violence into a popular resistance resembling the first Intifada, while Hamas is attempting to incite all the territories, including the Arab communities inside Israel. Police began setting up checkpoints at the exits of Palestinian villages and neighborhoods in East Jerusalem, and IDF units are reinforcing the Israel police in cities and along roads and also along the security fence. 2 terrorists boarded a bus and proceeded to shoot and stab passengers. A 78-year-old man died at the scene, and a 45-year-old man died in the hospital. Some 30 Gazans breached the border fence and crossed into Israel. 60-year-old Rabbi Yeshayahu Krishevsky was killed, and 2 other Israelis were wounded after a Palestinian driver rammed into a crowd. The terrorist then exited his car with a meat cleaver and began attacking the wounded. 2 Israelis were killed and 3 others suffered gunshot wounds in a combined shooting and stabbing attack by 2 Arab assailants on a bus. Some 15 people were wounded in that attack. An Arab woman stabbed a border police officer near the National Police headquarters in Jerusalem. An Israeli waiting for a bus near the city hall was stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist. Then an hour later, another terrorist stabbed 3 civilians in front of a cafe. A 13-year-old Israeli boy was stabbed nearly a dozen times by 2 Palestinian teenagers while riding his bicycle. A Palestinian rioter accidentally set himself on fire after attempting to throw a firebomb at IDF soldiers. A 22-year-old stabbed an Israeli soldier on a bus in Jerusalem and tried to snatch the soldier's gun. A 70-year-old Israeli woman was stabbed by a Palestinian as she boarded a bus. A 19-year-old attempted to stab border policemen near the Damascus gate. Palestinians claimed that attackers were completely innocent and had no knives, but were proved to be lying as the terrorists were shown in video footage with knives in their hands, chasing after a Jew whom they had stabbed moments before stabbing a 13-year-old boy who was leaving a convenience store on his bike. Police found a girl at a train station who confessed that she was on her way to Jerusalem, where she planned on stabbing Jews, soldiers, and the police. Hundreds of Palestinians threw firebombs at the Joseph's Tomb compound in Nablus in the West Bank, An Israeli soldier was stabbed and wounded. An IDF soldier was wounded in a stabbing attack. A border policeman was nearly stabbed at a checkpoint in the West Bank, and then 2 more stabbing attacks were foiled in Hebron and yet another in Jerusalem. A 19-year-old Israeli soldier was killed and 11 others were wounded at the central bus station in Beersheba. The Palestinian Authority is portraying terrorists as innocent victims of Israel. The PA chairman lied, saying that Israel had executed Hassan Manasrah, while the PA prime minister repeated the lie, telling the visiting Indian president that Israeli occupation forces assassinated the child. And the PA news agency also repeated the lie, stating that Israel attacked and executed Mohammed Nasmi. Satan's war is being waged. And that, my friends, is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, stay safe. Shalom.
Crowded rooms, I need more space than I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath the naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.